So for those that just joined us, welcome to the future of aerospace industry through a skilled workforce. I'm now delighted to hand over to Russell Burgess to start the session. Over to you, Russell. You can unmute yourself. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome to the future of aerospace industry through our skilled workforce webinar. I'm Russell Burgess and I'm privileged to chair the Aerospace Industry Reference Committee, more commonly known as the IRC. In the spirit of reconciliation, the IBSA Manufacturing Group acknowledges the traditional custodians country throughout Australia and the connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. Welcome to everyone. Particularly, we have the Chair of IBSA, Graham Russell, the CEO of IBSA, Sharon Robertson, our industry panellists and my fellow IRC members. Thank you for making the time to participate in this very important conversation today and into the future. This is one of a series of focused webinars hosted by IBSA Manufacturing on behalf of the industry reference committees. The purpose of the webinars is to further the conversation around how to ensure that the skills required are made available to Australian industry and its workforce, particularly in light of the government's 6 national manufacturing priority areas. We know that COVID-19 has hit this industry hard. As an industry and as individual companies, we need to review and rethink our priorities. The industry has had a hard reset and we need to be innovative and creative where possible. A skilled workforce meeting the needs of industry is going to be a very important asset in the future years. I would now like to invite Sharon Robertson, the CEO of IBSA Group, to facilitate the main proceedings.
Thank you, Russell, and may I also add my welcome and thank you to everyone joining us today. It's great to be joined by so many employers and industry reps from organisations providing tremendous support to the aviation industry. As Russell mentioned today, this webinar is one of a series of industry webinars that will provide to government with relevant on-the-ground advice from industry that they have requested to ensure your voice is heard. In total, IBSA is looking at running 6 of these industry webinars, which will hopefully provide a strong level of insight and feedback across the aviation sector to bring together into a report. And this report is then going to be presented to government and stakeholders at the ministerial level. And so the discussions being held today will be part of an information channel through the decision-making bodies. So thank you for your input. Before we actually get started, the Senator, the Honourable Michaela Cash, who you may know is Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business, has put together a video which she's asked for us to share with you. So I might ask Michelle or Nick just to quickly play that. It's 3 minutes.
As the Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business, I'm delighted to be part of this webinar series. I'd like to thank IBSA Group for their leadership in bringing together so many people across diverse industry networks. The Morrison government recognises the role of the manufacturing sector to the future prosperity of the Australian economy. And these events are a great way to provide relevant and practical feedback and advice back to government so that we can ensure the best possible outcomes for industry. The modern manufacturing strategy is a central plank of the Morrison government's agenda to fast-track Australia's economic recovery and secure future jobs and growth. Of course, an important element of delivering modern manufacturing in Australia is having the right sort of skilled workers across all 6 national manufacturing priorities. Our vocational education and training system is critical to the national economy and ensuring Australia's future prosperity. We need to support people to get the skills that will help us rebuild. And our role as a government is to get the policy settings right to ensure that those in the workforce have the opportunity to upskill and reskill. We know you need a strong, responsive and adaptable training system that can meet the needs of learners and employers. This is particularly important for the manufacturing industry, with a large percentage of your workforce gaining their skills through vocational education and training courses. And that's why the Morrison government is investing around $7 billion this year alone in the VET system, the biggest investment on record. You, as businesses and industry, have already told us that you need a pipeline of skilled workers to support our economic recovery. And that's why we announced a $1.2 billion investment to help create 100,000 new apprenticeships through the Boosting Apprenticeships Commencement Wage Subsidy. It's also why we established our $1 billion Job Trainer Fund, which will provide over 300,000 additional free or low-cost training places in sectors of demand. We also established the National Skills Commission to provide a new source of intelligence on Australia's labour market, workforce changes and current and emerging skills needs. That is the key, areas of skills needs. In other words, a focus on training in areas of anticipated employment growth, like modern manufacturing. The Morrison government will continue to do all that it can to support Australian manufacturing, with a focus on getting more Australians trained with the right skills to drive this important industry. This is going to be a skills-led recovery, and your engagement with events like this IBSA webinar series are a key part of getting it right. I thank you for your support and dedication to grow and modernise the manufacturing sector, and I really hope that your discussions are productive. Enjoy the webinar.
As you just heard from Minister Cash, a skills-led recovery is certainly what the government is keen to enable. So today provides an excellent opportunity for yourselves to provide input into the rollout of the modern manufacturing strategy and to ensure that we've got the skilled workforce required for that competitive advantage in the future. In terms of format for today, I'm pleased to have some really important panellists with us to participate in a Q&A session. That will run for about 30 minutes, followed by an opportunity to hear from you as we do a deeper dive into the discussions before we close the webinar at 12:30. From a technical perspective, we encourage you to add comments and questions via the chat function. We'll be recording all the comments and we want to make sure we don't miss any of those points. We had registered over 60 registrations, so it's really important to ensure that we all hear the audio correctly, that you ensure that your mics are muted. When we actually throw to you for a question, we'll just ask if you can unmute at that point. If anybody is having any problems throughout the course of this webinar, please direct those technical issues to the number that was provided in your email with the registration link. Okay, well, prior to us going to the panellists, we wanted to hear from you. We've got a 3-question, and I promise they're short questions, via a poll, and these have been repeated across each of the webinars in this series, and they've been designed to gather a really, I suppose, a large quantum of data, which will form part of the report. I'll now pass over to Michelle, who will hopefully put the questions up and talk you through how we actually complete that quick poll. So, Michelle, are you okay to throw that up for us now?
Absolutely, no problem. I've got that open for you now. Thank you very much. So here are the poll questions. There are 3 questions. Please make a choice for each of the 3 and then click submit down the bottom far right. Really would appreciate the judge. You've got 2 minutes to do that. So if you can go ahead and make those choices, that would be wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Still 15 people who haven't started yet. If they could make sure that they start their choices, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Another 50 seconds, so if you could possibly do that, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Okay, I only have 51% of people in at the moment. Seconds to go, then we'll close the poll down. So just those last few, if they could click submit, there are 2 who started but just haven't completed it. If you could do that, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Right. 10 seconds and final person. Thank you. So you're in process. If you could just go ahead and click that submit. Thank you. All right, popping the results up for you there. Can you see those results there, Sharon?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Michelle. And thank you to everyone for completing those results. I'm hoping you can all see them. But as you can see, the first question was around, do you feel optimistic about a post-COVID recovery in the aviation maintenance sector? And I think that, I suppose, the majority would be somewhat optimistic. So I think we're all really keen to try and actually use this as an opportunity to reignite the aviation maintenance sector. The second question was around, what do you see as the most significant change to how work will be organised over the next 5 years? And just looking at the results, adoption of new and emerging technology, along with, I'd say, increased demand for workers with specialist skills, probably stands out as the strongest response. And the last question was, to what extent will workforce skills development be critical to the business success or to success of business? And yeah, there's a really strong majority there, about to a great extent, which is really important that we're having this conversation. So thank you very much for all those that actually provided those insights. Okay, so we're now going to move to the panellist session, and I'm joined by 3 industry panellists. I'll introduce each one of them and then throw to a couple of questions for them. But just before we get started, I just wanted to double check. Troy, were we able to get your technology working just before?
Sharon, Michael's dealing with him. He's going to log back out and back in again. Michael's on the phone to him and he'll get him sorted. So if you carry on with the others for the moment. Thank you, Sharon.
Okay, so we'll put, so Troy Scott, hopefully we're just trying to sort out his technology. We can see him, but we can't hear him. So we're just trying to sort that. But in the interim, I shall introduce the other 2. So I'm pleased to introduce Group Captain Adrian Carswell. He's an aerospace engineer in the Air Force and has served for over 35 years. He's worked in multiple locations, including deployment to the Middle East and 3 years in the United States, where he commanded the Australian C-17 contingent at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. At present, he's a senior engineer with Air Force Headquarters and holds the position of Director of Engineering and Maintenance, Air Force. Welcome, Adrian. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Good morning.
Also joining us is Mary Brown from North Queensland Aviation Services. I'm just making sure Mary's there.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, good. Fantastic. Mary and her husband, Jeffrey, have been involved in the general aviation sector for more than 4 decades. Together, they've built an aircraft maintenance business in North Queensland, which has serviced regional, national and international client base for over 25 years. In the mid-2000s, they also established a helicopter flying school, charter AIOC, and purchased helicopters to support this new business. It is a pleasure to have you here, Mary. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
And I understand that Troy's back on. You're there, Troy?
I'll unmute
Okay.
you, Troy, if you want. There we
Yep,
go.
yep.
Just,
I'm here, sorry.
Oh, excellent. So Troy, welcome, and thank you for persevering with the technology. Troy has been in the aviation engineering industry for well over 30 years across defence and civil aviation. He has extensive experience in the training space, including RTOs and Part 147s, and has been a training manager at Alliance Airlines for over 5 years. Welcome, Troy.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to actually kick off the questions for the panel, and then everybody else will have the opportunity. But if I can start with your good self, Troy, the question that I would like to ask you is, what are the challenges do you see facing the aerospace industry over the next 2 to 5 years? And what do you think we need to do to address those challenges?
I think we're going to see a bit of a decline in the industry, just from my personal observation around the downturn, obviously from COVID. It's going to take a bit to get back to where we were. Our airline's in a little bit of a different space than a lot of the other industries around the world. But I think the biggest issue for us is going to be a decline in maintenance, and then it will take a considerable effort to get it back to where it was. Whether that's a slowdown in apprentices coming through, which is going to, again, slow the training coming through, or with guys actually that have dropped out of the industry not coming back in.
I certainly have heard that, obviously we all see that the decline in the industry is certainly going to have an impact, and yeah, take up of apprenticeships is again something I think we're all going to potentially have the challenge. Adrian, can I get your views on those questions from a defence perspective, of the challenges and what are we going to really need to prioritise and focus on?
Yeah, look, I think I'll start by saying that some of the challenges that we face are probably very different to most of the people on this call. Whilst we're not immune from the COVID-19 impacts, certainly we're certainly shielded from it. And when I look through the survey results from the April survey, we don't have the major concerns that were in terms of the key challenges that were identified through that survey. And I guess, and just in terms of scale, just a bit of background, when I talk about the Air Force technical workforce, I'm talking about 2,500 technicians involved with aircraft maintenance, another 1,000 ground technicians, and over 1,000 engineers in Air Force. So that's sort of the scale we're looking at. And in terms of the challenges that, if you like, defence aerospace is facing, so they are quite different. And one is the ability to make the change that we need to the technical workforce and the engineering workforce in light of a whole bunch of government reforms that are happening and defence reforms that are happening. And for example, even last week, the Minister for Defence launched the Defence Transformation Strategy. She talked about reform, and as part of that, she defined that as continuous transformation and noticed the challenges that were associated with that. I guess on a positive note for that, I think that Air Force has never been more open to change. We put in place a number of programs for that. Some people may have heard of Program Jericho, which is about, and that has been funding and will continue to fund technology initiatives and trials. Next year, more focused on organisational reforms. But there's also elements of the reform that directly relate to the government's modern manufacturing strategy, which we heard from with Senator Cash, and really education and skilling certainly a key area of that, strengthening the sovereign national base, something else that I'm certainly involved with. And so there's a key challenge for us, I think, in that first space, which is that skilling education piece and how defence engages with industry and academia on that. So that's where I see the first challenge and how that will work. And the second challenge is really links to that, and that's really people. We've got a very, I think, impressive array of capabilities in Air Force and coming into Air Force over the next few years. But quite frankly, we don't have enough people to maintain them. So there's a need to partner with industry, but the question is, how do we partner with industry in a way that's mutually beneficial? It helps develop a national support base, strengthen our sovereign industry capabilities, but really still ensures that Air Force has the ability to meet the operational requirements that the government expects from us. So people start with recruiting, and people, that was something that Troy mentioned in terms of people entering the industry. But Air Force recruiting is going great. I will say at the moment we are meeting all of our recruiting targets at the moment, but we are in a competitive environment for people with a background in STEM. So Air Force has done a few things, and Defence has, in terms of making it easier to move between reserves and permanent Air Force. And that allows people to have different careers, perhaps in civil aviation as well as in Defence at various stages throughout their life. We're looking at something that's really quite groundbreaking for Air Force, and that's mid-level entry. Normally we bring people in as recruits. We're only looking at mid-level entry, so we've got a pilot program to bring people in as mid-level engineers as squadron leaders or major equivalents. That'll be a pilot program next year. We're going to look at technicians, bringing people in as supervisors, perhaps in 2022, the pilot program for that. We've also opened the aperture for the type of engineers that we'll recruit, and as part of that, so we'll recruit from more diverse backgrounds, and we're developing with the University of New South Wales engineering fundamentals, aerospace engineering fundamentals course, which will be delivered from 2022 onwards. And the last point that I'll just make in regards to that is that we know that we can't develop all the skills that we need in-house, and so we need to make some decisions about how we engage with industry. So that I think there'll be some embedding of workforce in industry, and perhaps vice versa. Certainly with engineers, that will happen, and we're making some decisions on that next year. In regard to technicians, I think that's probably an activity for 2022, 23 before we make decisions on that. So I think they're the two biggest challenges that we're facing, and I'll sort of stop there and rather than carrying on.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Adrian, and some really good insights there. And can I just say, I particularly like your phrase there about, how do we engage with people, academia and business. I think that's what we're all trying to line up at the moment to ensure that we get that responsive supply chain that we're all going to need. Mary, given your extensive experience in the industry, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Sharon, I guess from my perspective, our sector of the industry is quite different again from Troy's and Adrian's, being general aviation, which predominantly is more aligned with rural and regional aviation, and that breeding ground, if you will, of a lot of the aviation sector. But still a very important sector in regard, especially in the regions where our support of agriculture, freight movements, natural disaster management, and just general charter and usage there, it's that connectivity of those rural and regional communities. So what we're seeing already in our part of the industry is definitely a very significant decline in the availability of licensed aircraft maintenance engineers. From a pilot perspective, things are not so challenged because of the steps that have been taken for flying training and the HEC steps and those kind of things. So the pilot training seems to be quite well managed, but we are certainly seeing a very significant and worrying skill shortage in that Lamey area. And from what we're seeing with the announcements of some of the regulatory projections that are coming forward, there is very real concern in the industry that these challenges will be exacerbated. Particularly the concern in the industry, well, Part 43, and I don't know if the listeners are aware of, Part 43 will enable independent Lameys to travel within the regions without a Car 30, the requirement of a Car 30 or Part 145 approval, and do independent maintenance, which will address some of the challenges, but from a longer term perspective, the industry concerns are who is then going to host and train the apprentices and the trainees that can continue to develop up that skills that are so desperately needed within the region. The other issue that we have from a general aviation perspective is quite simply location. the percentage of skilled engineers that choose to live within the region is somewhat smaller than clearly those that choose to live in urban areas. So that is an additional challenge that is faced within our sector. So one of the challenges is how do we address that? Now, from our own personal experience, what we found over the years is attracting people to a region for jobs has some short-term merit, but it is not from a long-term sustainable point of view. So we take a different approach in that we drain our own. Choose those people who've made the decision to live in the region, and then how do we support them to get that skill set they need to be able to address the needs of the regions and then to be our future business providers or maintenance providers within the region. So there's some of the challenges that we see moving forward. How do I think that industry, what do we need to do? I don't think as an industry that we market ourselves very well from a career path perspective for our young people. It's a very competitive market. Careers nowadays, I know that sounds quite an anomaly, saying competitive and careers in the same sentence, but that's been my observation, is that we as an industry, we don't have very easily defined pathways into the particular roles. And again, I'm speaking from general aviation perspective, but then also acknowledging that a lot of GA does transition up into the larger parts of the industry. But if you were to ask any young people within who are in the schooling system at the moment, how do I become a licensed aircraft engineer, or how do I become a pilot? I don't think that they can easily answer those questions, because there is some misalignment between what are the federal requirements to get those LAMI licenses and what each and every state does around their funding and their support of their employers and so forth. So I think we have some real challenges there, and that's probably two of the things that we need to look to address. How do we get that complete alignment between licence outcomes, and how do we market our industry to make it attractive to get the interest of the young people in the first place?
Thank you so much, Mary. And I think you probably would agree with me. Listening to the panel just now, there's clearly a diverse set of challenges facing the aerospace industry, which hopefully we'll get the chance over the next hour to ask a bit more and dig a bit deeper. So as you're probably aware, we've actually got quite a wide range of attendees today, which is certainly a testament to the amount of interest in the aerospace sector. This next part of the session will be interactive, but for the time being, can people please stay on mute, and then we'll call on you to unmute at the right time. Of course, we want to hear from as many of you as possible, so please utilise the chat function to ensure that we can get your ideas and your questions to the panel. And so just while you're thinking about what those questions might be, just a couple of scene setting from my perspective. As Australia emerges from what we all hope is the worst part of the effects of COVID-19, it's going to be really important that we start to focus our attention on recovery and capitalising on what those emerging opportunities will be. The Commonwealth Government has obviously announced a $1.5 billion modern manufacturing strategy as part of its plan to rebuild the economy, create jobs and recover from the COVID-19 recession. We're keen to ensure that the information from all industries is considered in the implementation of this strategy. Results of each of these webinars will be directly fed into the modern manufacturing roadmap, so we're really keen to see what we can do to provide those solutions. To start the, I suppose, bidding, I've got a number of questions to facilitate your thinking and our interaction, which will help to inform, obviously, the discussions today. And I invite everyone to participate and remember to obviously put your comments in the chat rooms. So if we just go to the questions that I have to get things going. The first one is, we talked about, and I think all of them, both Mary, Adrian and Troy, obviously talked about potential challenges for the aviation sector. What's the most critical one? And if I could suggest, I certainly think the most critical one is attracting, as Mary suggested, people to the industry, how they get into the industry and what their careers pathways might provide for them. Not wanting to put anyone on the spot, but I might ask Russell, your thoughts on that?
Yes, attraction is always a problem. I must admit, and I'll talk from my perspective, probably years ago, we used to be well represented at Careers Expos in the school. Unfortunately, probably, and I'll say at my end of the world, we've gone more and more to online. So all the information's available online. The hard part is, particularly young people, they have so many other interests. Just trying to attract them to our online website. A website doesn't answer all questions. If you go into the school system, I think most careers advisors probably only get 40 hours of training. So their awareness of what's available across the broad sector of industries is pretty limited. As an industry, we need to get out and promote. We need to be at Careers Expos. We need to be in schools. We need to be running promotions because it's a competitive market. As Adrian said, obviously, defence recruitment's going okay, but from a STEM perspective, it is a competitive marketplace. I can understand from Mary's perspective, in regional and rural areas, how do you make it attractive, one, for people to come in the industry, but also to stay in regional and rural Australia? That's a big issue in itself. Again, it may be attractive. I know by the number of candidates I get that will apply to us for apprenticeships, but they're all looking and moving away from the country to the city. How do we address that? We've got to get out and promote, show the advantages, show people what's available in the industry. If we don't do that, we will die. And unfortunately, at the moment, we're in a downturn. I know from my perspective, whenever we don't recruit, it takes us 2 or 3 years to regenerate a level of interest. So we really need to be out now promoting, not only for the immediate, but definitely for the future.
Yep, Mary?
Sharon, if I could just offer an example, speaking to Ross's point, I couldn't agree more. So just, if you can indulge me for a moment, we are, as I said, we live in a regional area, but we're only an hour's drive from a major centre. And when my children were going through secondary school, it used to frustrate me that the local secondary schools used to put our kids on buses and take them to the city where the careers markets were held, because as a regional community, we were not showcasing the career opportunities ourselves. So on the one hand, the community was lamenting that we were losing all of our youth to the city, but on the other hand, we were actually facilitating that by putting the kids in the buses and taking them to the city where the Careers Expos were being hosted, because the resources and the funding was available to those organisations to host those events. So about 5 years ago, when I got into local government, one of the key priorities that I requested was we host our own Careers Day, which I had a little resistance at first, but we did do it. We got together with the business community and we needed to showcase to our local children the career opportunities were there, because quite frankly, they didn't know it. They had a perception in their head of what a farming community provided, but it wasn't what they thought it was. So I'm very pleased to say that 4 years down the track, we've got 3 secondary schools in our region. All 3 advised us, and we weren't able to host it in 2020. So in 2019, they all advised us that they have now stopped taking their children down to the city for the careers markets. They keep only into the region, and the uptake with local employers, the retention that we're having, we're really starting to see that. Now, that to me is a very simple process that has had a very quick turnaround within our regional communities, and it's a great model that could potentially be used in other rural and regional communities to address those challenges Russell just spoke about.
Thank you, Mary. And I do wonder whether the industry downturn is also going to further exacerbate that lack of, attracting people into the industry with the challenges it's facing. I'm just looking at some of the questions here, and I see, and correct me please if I've got your name wrong, Alana, you're from Northern Territory, and just looking at your comments there about the challenges, I'm wondering some of the things that Mary's just suggested, is that something you think that might be an opportunity for attracting people into the industry in Northern Territory? Do you would like to comment at all? Oh, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Lovely. Yes, we had government funding for an organisation in the Northern Territory to host these events. I can probably get my colleague Terry Lawler to fill you in more. He's not here at the moment, but there is no support for that to take place anymore. Now, we used to go to remote places like Nullarbor in Gove. We used to go to Tennant Creek, Alice Springs, Catherine and Darwin. And so we would go out to the areas and we would be asking students, our organisation, because we're a skills advisory council, we would be asking students, teachers, parents, you know, what the students want to do when they leave high school, and give them opportunities on support services, where to go for information. So without that sort of support, we are looking into other ways that we can provide that sort of service, but it's a work in progress. I do know my colleague is working in that space. I could fill you in later or get him to, but I do know it's something that when we found it weren't being run anymore, it wasn't the organisation, it was, I think, the support surrounding that, hosting those events, because they are quite large. But yeah, that is something that is very important to the Northern Territory, especially the aero skills, because we had a lot of students, and I found the most comments from students in Nullarbor and Gove was they wanted to be a Laney, and I was surprised and I was really proud. So we want to keep that enthusiasm going.
Excellent. No, it sounds like there's a unanimous, I suppose, thinking here about the fact that we do need to do more, and certainly if we can collaborate and share ideas about how to promote the opportunities in both the regions and the aerospace industry more broadly is certainly one of the must-dos. Just looking at the questions, I'm just going to move to the matter of lamies, which I think Mary touched on as well. And there's a question there from Leon Drury, where he's asked us to think about what will be needed to bridge the currency issue for lamies that return to the industry after a period of downtime. And that's a very pertinent point. Can I put you on the spot, Mary, on that one, or maybe Russell?
I'll go first, because it's an issue that we're dealing with at the moment. Yeah, there's a requirement that for a licensed aircraft maintenance engineer to use his privileges 6 months in 24. Obviously, we've had a number of lamies that haven't worked since March. Some of those lamies are now coming back on the job, which is great, and we're running human factors training and we're running refresher training across their respective types. But we are facing further challenges that particularly our licensed aircraft maintenance engineers who look after the A380, it's possible that it may be 3 or 4 years before they actually use their certification on that aircraft. So we're certainly scratching our head at the moment, because we don't even have an A380 in Australia for us to even play with. They're all in the US, so that's fine for our maintenance base there, but it's certainly something we're going to have to look at. We'll have to talk to CASA around. We'll have to talk to Airbus as well as to what simulation we can do in fault finding troubleshooting, looking at equivalent technology aircraft that we can get them to work on. But yes, there's going to be a major problem facing certain parts of the industry. I don't have all the answers as yet.
Thank you, Russell. Mary, any thoughts on that one?
Sharon, probably from the GA perspective, we're not so impacted as what probably the airline sector is, in that our lamies have been able to continue to provide maintenance. In fact, in some areas they're reporting that they've seen an increased demand because the airlines haven't been available. There's been a requirement for some more charter flights, again, in rural and regional communities. Our biggest challenge is the age demographic of our lamies. And a lot of them are who are beginning to transition out of the industry, and the gap sitting in behind them with that skill set to be able to provide. That's probably our absolute largest challenge at the moment. So I'm not sure how we address that one. That's been a perennial problem for a long time we've been talking about.
And I know Russell's also talked about that in a number of the conversations at the Industry Reference Committee about that ageing workforce and that gap that sits behind it. Troy, do you have any comments on what we're talking about now?
Troy, you need to unmute yourself on your mobile phone there. I've sent a request to unmute. You there, Troy?
While he's trying to unmute, Adrian, I'm assuming that the defence and the aviation sector there were slightly different challenges with lamies and I suppose ageing workforces. Any comments on that?
Yeah, look, we're not certainly facing the same challenges at all. In terms of entry, I've already said that we're over 90% of our recruitment target. Things that have been very successful for us are something called ADF Gap Year, which is for all of defence, but we have a stream for that for technical people, and we bring in 50 school graduates a year into the technical stream, and about 95% of those go on to a career in Air Force, but they get a year of going around and seeing different parts of Air Force. So that's certainly very successful for us. And in terms of retaining skills, I guess as we move towards alignment with civilian licensing requirements, we are going to face some of those challenges with currency. The benefit that we have is that it does vary across Air Force. Some of our platforms, we have some very, very good training aids and training systems. And so we're able to use those to get people up to speed quite quickly. For those platforms where we don't have those training aids, it is a lot more difficult for us, for people that leave and go into a non-maintenance role for when they come back to get them up to speed quickly. So there are some challenges that we do face there, but perhaps because of our size, we're able to, address that through our bigger workforces more readily.
No, absolutely. Troy, I'm guessing we're still having issues there?
I'm working with Troy. I'm trying to see if
no worries. Okay. So, look, I'm just looking at, there's quite a few questions coming through there, and I think that alignment and perhaps some issues around the training that's currently provided. John Templer is actually talking about the defence requirements, the licensing requirements, CASA requirements, that there's a little bit of misalignment that mightn't be necessarily helping us. John, did you want to talk to that at all, or a question for the panel specifically about that? If you want to unmute yourself, John.
More the need for it. It is very confusing. I've first-hand experience with it, writing training packages for TAFE, plus 38 years in the industry as a lamie, everything from apprentice to value management and working in the field a lot, so particularly relate to what Mary's been saying in the remote area. But specifically with the training packages, I have more questions, but it is incredibly confusing at the moment. Defence historically is still I believe it's historically, because I didn't see any students going from the MEA training packages to defence, but defence is still referred to. Terminology is still used, and it's very unfortunate, but it makes it very, very difficult to make it a working thing. It's throwing CASA into that, which is heavily included in it, and it just becomes an absolute, frankly, at times it becomes a nonsense. And it would be great if there could be some alignment. I mean, that would benefit everyone. It would take a little bit of hard work, but to align defence, CASA and the private sector it would make a lot of sense, and it would benefit everyone. You'd get flow through. I mean, the defence knows that they train a lot of people for the civil market, and if we could make that easier, and it would probably benefit defence as well, actually. People would be more keen to do it. So really, that's it. There's an awful lot of confusion tied in there, and then if you chuck on top of that the CASA licensing confusion, which is very, very relevant because that's what all of the students are doing the MEA packages for, is to get a license at the end and earn more money. CASA's confusing licensing program at the moment, and the Part 43 changes making it even worse. Just incredibly difficult. It needs some really focused looking at the training packages, I believe.
Thanks, John. And I think Ryan has asked something similar. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm gonna throw to Russell on that one because I think there's some work afoot that you might want to share with the team.
Yes. So at the moment we're doing a project. It's split into two. So the first part was looking at qualifications for non-licensing, and that's out for public consultation at the moment, and you can find that through IBSA's website. The second stage of the program will be looking at alignment of particularly the pathway or closer alignment to the ASA requirements. We'll be consulting with industry, both GA, small to medium type regional airlines, larger airlines such as Qantas, Virgin, Jetstar, and also defence. Obviously, defence going down to the JASA requirement, alignment across to EASA and the CASA licence requirements will become significantly easier. The training package is an interesting one in that, one, we're trying to align with EASA and CASA requirements. We're also trying to meet ASPA's requirements. So that compounds it a little bit further as well, because ASPA has its views of how a training package should be, and then we're trying to align with an international requirement. So there's certainly some work to be done. We're certainly keen and hopeful that we can address a lot of the issues that are outstanding. Timing at the moment will be interesting. Obviously, the industry is very focused on recovery at the moment. So I'm hoping that we can generate a lot of interest within industry to become involved in the discussions. We did do a lot of work consulting with industry. I will say at the moment we're going to have to go back and revisit some of that because talking for sort of the RPT side of it, from Qantas, Virgin, Jetstar perspective, a number of the key people that we spoke with are no longer in those positions, are no longer in. We need to go back, make contact with those organisations, talk to the people that are now in key roles, get them to understand what the issues are, get their perspective, because some of the last thing we want to do is go through, develop a whole pile of change, put it out for industry consultation, and then industry comes back and where we thought we were the beginning of the year, late last year, maybe, hopefully not, could be quite different to where we are today. But certainly that's the second stage, and we'll be getting into that very early in the new year. That's the aim.
Excellent. Thanks, Russell. So yes, there's active work away, but underway, I should say, but as like many of us, a lot of things, COVID has certainly adjusted timelines and adjusted perhaps some of the things that we prioritised a little while ago. So I hope that helps Ryan and, John a little bit in regards to some of your questions. Nick, oh gosh, I'm going to get your name wrong. Nick, you know who you are. There's a question that you put there about the shortage of experienced and certified aerospace inspection technicians.
That's correct.
Can you talk a little bit to that one and direct a question perhaps to the panel?
Look, the question is very specific to a sector in the aerospace industry, which is non-destructive testing, for the frame testing, frame inspections, and also engine inspection, on-wing, etc. Currently, there is certification, is aerospace certification, CASA approved, etc. However, there is a broader non-destructive testing industry that's out there that has a lot more resource pool available. However, it seems to be they run parallel with no no real ability to interact in each other's industries, is there a consideration for this, a training or a bridging training program to be facilitated to incorporate the increased demand as we go look into the future?
You there, Sharon?
Sorry, I said, Russell, did you want to put your hand up for that one, or Adrian?
Yep. Look, I'll start off, I guess.
Yeah.
There's a number of areas within the aerospace industry that have high demand, but the volume, the number of people required is very small. So it's something we're going to have a close look at. Currently in the training package, if you look at aircraft surface refinishing, they were training that was developed right through to Cert 4. At the moment, nobody delivers the Cert 4 qualification in Australia. What we probably have to do as an industry is start to look and work with other qualifications in training packages such as MEM, where that may be available, and develop a skill set or a bridging component to bring people across into aviation. Being realistic, it's a very important area. Non-destructive test, the volume coming through to have a dedicated aerospace training qualification is probably not there. But certainly I can see some sort of alignment, a skill set to bridge people across in the industry is one that we will need. And it's going to be, whether it be aircraft service refinishing, whether it be an NDT test. I think there's going to be a number of areas we're going to have to have a close look at that. And we're going to have to cooperate with other industry reference committees and import maybe their qualification and add some of their need to it. That's where I see it.
Thanks, Russell. Adrian or Mary, any comments? I might ask Adrian first.
Yeah, look, I guess on a couple of those points, I guess with NDT, we do train to a global aerospace standard, so we run our training internally up at Brisbane, and we wouldn't be, we're not saying at this stage thinking of departing and moving away from that at all. It is possible that there is a push within Defence to have more tri-service training, and if the level of NDT requirement was to increase within Maritime and Army, then we might look at perhaps mapping that standard against other standards, but it's not an activity that we're looking at the moment, I will say, and so we will train to that standard. We do have 50 NDT techs across Defence Aviation. Sorry, that's just Air Force, as well as I think Navy has some. And we train about about 6 a year, so we don't train big numbers. Just on the point that Russell made with regard to surface finishers, Air Force has made the decision that we will. I'll come back to you.
No worries, Adrian. No worries. I've got 2 dogs also that like to make noise at the most inappropriate times, so that's okay. Just while we're taming Adrian's dogs, we might just double check. Troy's had a few technical difficulties. I know that he'd had some great insights on some of the stuff we're talking about. Troy, have you had any success getting you back on, or you're not there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, fantastic. You're free to talk about anything, given you've had a few technical difficulties. The floor's yours.
No worries. I just want to touch on the NDT. I guess the biggest hurdle for NDT from a medium-sized aviation business is that we just don't have the quantity of NDT tasks requiring full-time NDT technicians. So we outsource the majority of our NDT stuff.
Troy, I think we've lost.
He's dropped out again. Please carry on, Sharon. I think.
Sorry, Troy, it looks like the technology's got the better of your mic today. I might just, while some of the other questions that are coming through the chat room, I'm going to try and perhaps move to. We've all talked about the challenges and obviously attracting people, the alignment of our training, you know, whether it's to other licensing requirements, the inclusion of things like NDT and the alignment or bringing together, creation of skill sets. There's been some really good ideas there. But I'm just going to throw into the second question that's up on the screen there. Which jobs are likely to be impacted by what we've been through? Do we see additional skills being identified in jobs or roles going forward? Do you see things that are going to need to change? I mean, not discounting, I suppose, the challenges we've had for some time now. Is there any new changes in, I suppose, job roles that we will need to start thinking about and potentially respond to? I might go to Mary. Are you seeing anything that you're going to have to look at differently or will need to think about differently?
Not specifically, because from our industry's perspective, there hasn't been a lot of change into business as normal because the work has actually remained consistent, if not improved. I keep harping back to it's just a generalised skill shortage and availability across the whole sector, most particularly around that avionics sector. We're seeing a massive shortage in avionics ladies that are able to support our industry. And it's already been touched on, you know, the NDT, the specialised stuff that you don't see a lot of volume coming through, but it certainly is a critical part of continuing maintenance. So the NDT, the aircraft welding, the fabric finishes, those kind of specialised sectors, that there's just not the volume. But as our older demographic who have that skill set are starting to transition out of the industry, there's not a replacement of those skills. The other one that's also emerging in our part of the world from a new technology is absolutely drones. Because we are predominantly an agricultural sector within the regions, the drone technology has been used more and more around supporting agriculture. Also our power line networks, we're starting to see some drones emerging in that sector. And there is new technologies emerging because of the vastness of the country, and as the connectivity and the communications within the regions are starting to improve, then it's enabling us to start to use these newer technologies. So that'll probably be where we start to see some changes within that GA sector.
Okay, and I'm imagining particularly drones and new technology is something that is also impacting our defence sector and changing job roles. Adrian, do we have the dogs under control? Do you want to throw some thoughts there?
I think that I guess we distinguish from different types of drones. So with the large drones, which we're bringing into service, such as Sky Guardian and Triton, effectively we're treating them like aircraft. And so we will use our aviation technicians for that. We are looking to reach out to the manufacturers and to the RAF and the USAF and the US Navy about how are there changes in terms of maintenance, training and instruction in relation to that. So that's on the big UAV side, if you like. With regard to smaller drones, actually really within Air Force we're not using a lot of smaller drones, and certainly not to the same extent that Army is, and so and we're not really managing them under our aviation training system or regulations. So perhaps it doesn't really answer Mary's question, apart from the fact that from an Air Force perspective, it's not something that we're looking at, except in terms of the big UAVs.
Yeah. Any other new technology, perhaps, that will start to change job roles?
Oh, look, I think what we're seeing within Air Force is that perhaps we might end up having a bit of a divide between those platforms which are civil variants. For example, we have a number of 737 variants within Air Force. We have Airbus and so on, and how we train those people. There will be some differences between the training we give to those people and the training that perhaps we deliver to the technicians that are maintaining fighter combat aircraft, for example, and some of the UAVs, because the different drivers in terms of interoperability with the US are different, how they're operated is different, and how we might engage with the industry will be different. So that's something we're going to look at certainly next year, particularly, is to understand what these new with new capabilities, and they do have what we call novel materials that do require a different skill set. At the moment, that skill set is being primarily delivered through platform type training and not through our, if you like, our apprenticeship training or our basic training for aviation technicians. But at some stage, we will need to figure out how big that type training gets. At the moment, it is quite extensive for some of those new platforms, such as the Joint Strike Fighter. And so there's a very big training overhead, and we need to think about whether that can continue to be absorbed for those newer platforms with those novel materials.
Thank you.
Yep.
No, really interesting. A different set of challenges, but still certainly starts to get us thinking about, how we actually adopt new and emerging technology, which is actually going quite different areas. I've been told on good authority that Troy's technology has been addressed. So if you can bear with me, I'm going to throw to him one more time. And I really appreciate the fact that you're hanging in there. Troy, do you want to try one more time? Then if not, we might separately get some insights from you and send out to the group. So you're dialed in.
Sharon. He has dropped his, he's back again now. Troy, can you unmute yourself, please? Hi, Troy. Could you unmute yourself, please? He has dialed in. There you go. Troy, can you just unmute yourself? Thank you. On your screen? Just on the bottom of your screen? Perfect. Thanks, Troy. Sharon, do you want to ask Troy that question again?
I think Troy, poor Troy. Are you there, Troy? Should we try or should we move on? Okay, no, I think we'll keep moving. Look, very sorry about that. Troy's obviously got one of the biggest challenges of technology at the moment, and I'm sure we've all been where he is at the moment, so hopefully we'll be able to feed in his comments later. Just looking at some of the other questions, or more of a comment. Peter Schreiner is raising some good comments. We're just going back to the conversations about drones and whatnot. I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about that, because obviously that starts to move us into a different space, but it still changes in our job roles. So Peter, did you want to unmute yourself and throw a question to the panel at all?
No, it's just a comment, Sharon. I was just really going to say that the point there is that the GEO team was working with the maintenance team, so to identify use of drones in this instance, and that it actually that there's a lot more collaboration across areas, is what I'm saying, in the use of technology.
And look, that collaboration is certainly something that's come through a number of our webinars to date, is the fact that we need now more than ever to really facilitate that sovereign capability here in Australia more than we've done before in the manufacturing sector. That collaboration is a really important aspect of driving that quantum change that we're trying to respond. A couple of questions here when we start looking at the changes in the system and sector. I see Adam Luckhurst, you talked a little bit about, has a question there about, has there been any modelling or thinking? Did you want to put a question to the panel at all, Adam?
Oh, look, I hope you can hear me. I guess the question for me was, it's obviously a pretty uncertain environment with COVID and the recovery from COVID. And I guess it was trying to get a picture of, what are the long-term impacts, given that I would imagine that there's, obviously there's probably been workforce shortages, there'll be people who are displaced because of COVID, but as the rebuild happens, some will have moved on. So I'm wondering whether there's been some thinking at an industry level about what the overall impact of COVID is on the sort of workforce and what you think potential needs might be under different scenarios, because it's clearly very uncertain, but actually trying to map out what are the scenarios that might be there and what are the impacts. And then that actually, will help you, of course, address what some of those challenges might be. So I was just wondering whether there's been any industry-wide sort of modelling done based on different scenarios to help drive, a response to some of the challenges.
That's definitely, I'm thinking either Russell or Adrian might want to comment on that. Any work done? I think Russell.
Yeah, look, yeah. I'll probably lead off. Adrian's probably got a slightly different perspective of where they're at. Look, I'm with Qantas. Very early days. The border's opening are great news. Up until the last couple of weeks, we've been flying at 30% of our domestic aircraft capacity and approximately 4% of our international aircraft capacity. There was a mild celebration last week. We actually flew on one day 10,000 passengers. We would normally fly 10,000 passengers every 45 minutes. So opening of the borders is great news. We're certainly busily trying to reactivate aircraft. It takes approximately 550 man-hours, depending on the aircraft, to bring it back into service. There will be challenges, particularly with some of the digital aircraft. Talking with Airbus, it was never intended that we would lock aircraft down for lengthy periods of time. So some aircraft will come back into service and some mightn't want to play the game. We will have manpower aiming at about 80% of what we had previously pre-COVID. At this stage, domestic capacity of aircraft in service will increase. We're waiting to see what the passenger demand will be. It's looking great over the Christmas New Year period. The big unknown going into next year is business travel. What will that level be? Utilisation of aircraft drives the maintenance program. So we're going through a process and we are doing a number of scenarios. We had an ageing workforce. We will see from engineering approximately 650 to 700 people depart the business around about between now and the end of the year. That will leave us at about 80% of what we previously had. International travel, we may not resume to a reasonable level until 2024. We really don't know. So we've got a number of models being sort of looked at. I would have liked to have had someone from Qantas maybe on a panel today, but we are far too early in that planning stage to really be able to discuss too much. I would imagine Virgin are probably in the same boat. Baines have just taken over. They'll be looking at their business. Obviously, Rex entering the market. They've committed to particularly Sydney, Melbourne, and they'll go to Brisbane as well. That'll bring challenges on the East Coast. It really depends on how many people have confidence and on a regular basis want to fly. So that's one of the major considerations we're looking at. But I can assure you certainly from a Qantas group perspective, we've got a number of scenarios being looked at and we're trying to hedge our bets in a number of ways. From my view, we knew we had a skills shortage looming. All we've done is pushed it back a couple of years. So from my view, I know within the business, I'll be certainly targeting key people from early next year to start trying to plan ahead. Because unfortunately, by the time it really becomes apparent that we have a skills shortage, it's too late.
Yeah. Look, some really great insights there, Russell. Thank you so much for sharing, as sobering as it is. You certainly see the domino effect where maintenance is obviously impacted by the amount of planes, which is impacted by the amount of people that are going to hop on a plane, which is impacted by confidence. So clearly it's certainly a challenge to model what the future might look like. Adrian, though, I imagine yours is a different scenario to some extent. Did you want to comment on that at all?
Yes, so certainly our flying rates have reduced because we're not doing as many exercises because of the travel restrictions that are related to that. But the reduction has not been nothing like what the airlines have experienced. And also we have had some staff obviously off manning roadblocks and quarantine hotels and that sort of thing. So but the reduction might be in the order of 10 to 20%, which is very different to what the airlines have experienced. So we don't have those issues. In regards to workforce modelling, we are, as an Air Force now, doing some much more sophisticated modelling in terms of future workforce drivers and trends. And so the biggest thing that's come out of that so far is that in the past we've turned the recruiting tap on and off in response to normally government direction. And what we can see now is the flow-on effect that has throughout our careers and creates problems at the supervisory level or the senior level. And so what we're able to demonstrate now is that we shouldn't do that. And so we're certainly under our workforce people have made the determination that they will not vary our recruitment numbers significantly from year to year. They might adjust in the order of 10 to 20% in relation to outflow, but in terms of technical workforce, they're certainly going to keep them at around about the same level every year. So that is a positive in terms of certainty for us going forward.
Okay, just trying to pick up on a little bit what you're just talking about there, Adrian. Just an idea, is there opportunities for defence and perhaps the civil sector to work together on workforce modelling to try and smooth out those workforce needs? Because clearly we've got a bit of a different speed. Is there any consideration of that perhaps?
Well, certainly we want to understand outflow to industry if that was going to change, and we do track that overall. I guess our modelling at the moment is built upon the data drawn from our corporate HR system, so it might not be easy to do that, but certainly I think where we need to be understanding is where there are trends happening in the civil sector which might then flow into the defence sector and vice versa. And so I think that's probably what we need is a mechanism just to share that rather than doing the modelling together. I think just sharing the information and the outcomes of that modelling is what we need to be doing.
Yeah, and of course around the conversation out on that side, Mary, from a regional perspective, I mean, just a general feel, have you seen a downturn in demand? Has there been more workforce requirements over the last wee while? Your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. We are consistently hearing feedback from the industry that there is definitely a shortage of LAMIs able to service, and as I mentioned, especially given that we've seen increased activity in some areas, those concerns are even more significant. And the question being asked is how do we address those concerns, as we've all talked about? How do we address meeting those challenges? I don't think anyone has the silver bullet that is the solution at this point to address that, but everything that's been discussed up until now around more collaboration, definitely the recognition of skill sets across maybe those who are leaving defence. You know, they may have decided that they're moving on to a new career, that there could be some transition around into the commercial sector that might alleviate some of those challenges. All of those discussions certainly need to be put on the table now. I think the timing is now perfect, and I know there has been a lot of discussion from government around how do we address an aviation recovery. And I think the time is absolutely perfect now. But one thing that is sure is that as an industry, we are going to need some support from the government to assist in that framework, whether it be financial support, whether it be some sort of framework to assist the industry to come together to start to really urgently address those issues, because they have been ongoing for quite some time, but COVID certainly has brought them to the fore well and truly.
Thank you, Mary. And just thinking, you know, whether there's a... Sorry?
Have you got me? It's Troy.
Oh, yes, we do. Oh, my gosh. This is very exciting. Over to you, Troy, while you can.
I just wanted to add the point that the other issue I think that's going to come out of COVID is that the competition for maintenance is going to be fierce. It's just not in Australia, the competition for MROs doing maintenance in Australia, but we know that the airlines in Australia already send a great deal of maintenance offshore. I think that's going to be more of an issue for our aviation industry in Australia, given that the aviation MROs overseas are hurting worse than the ones that are in Australia at the moment. And I think that the
the cost to do maintenance in Australia is going to be an issue going in the next couple of years. I'm a little bit with Russell on that. We're not going to see a major skill shortage in the next 12 months, but certainly it's just kicking the can down the road if we don't start to do something about it now. Because eventually those MROs overseas are going to come back to full capacity and they won't have any room for the airlines to send their stuff over there.
It's certainly going to be a complex challenge for the sector navigating through the next year or so, and I certainly think there might be, I think Mary's comments before about, whether it's the opportunity to really work collaboratively to develop a roadmap that perhaps provides those links between, I suppose, our civil, our defence and our regional demands and opportunities so that we can actually work more collaboratively through what's going to be very uncertain times over the next while. Then you throw in migration and all those other challenges which are going to further change the dynamics. It's going to be an interesting year ahead. We probably have got time for one more question, and I'm just looking at the chat room. This is your chance where we've got some excellent presenters here to answer questions. I'm just having a quick through. Anyone's got anything further? I mean, Alana, you've done some great connecting there. Well done, which is really good to see. I don't know if you wanted to add anything more about that collaboration side. You're a true example of it. Did you have any other comments you wanted to add, Alana?
Sharon, yes, thank you. We act as a conduit to make sure that industry in the Northern Territory understand the changes and have the opportunity to provide feedback on the development of the training package for the aero skills. I mean, all of the training packages, I take care of the aero skills. So if when I'm talking to stakeholders, I like to get as much information, not just about the skills, but about the workforce development as well, because it's another thing that Isaac and T have that finger on the pulse. So I'm always engaging with stakeholders. I'm very well known in the Northern Territory with a lot of the aero skills people, and any opportunity that I have to collaborate with them and others to better the skills and understand those workforce development needs, I'm always going to get up and get out there, and I learn a lot about their roles at the same time. So if anyone ever needs to contact me, I'm very engaged with the Northern Territory, and so is my colleague Terry Lawler. So if anyone wants to connect, be my guest. I'd love to connect with you guys.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alana, and great collaboration started already, which is fantastic. Okay, look, we're going to wrap up. I'm going to throw to each of the panel members and say thank you, but also ask if there's any final closing comments, particularly when we start thinking about the where to from here. The key takeouts for me have certainly been around collaboration and roadmaps and really trying to work together through the next wee while, attracting people into the sector, but also managing that demand, which is going to vary for the next while. Adrian, last comments from your good self?
Oh, look, can I actually take up a couple of earlier comments as well? It won't take very long. One was on ACERT, the surface finishers and the training for that. So Air Force has made the decision that we will no longer conduct surface finishing using uniformed people. So that is going out to industry, and that will be done over the next 12 to 24 months. And so as a result of that, we are expecting industry to develop a viable training path for those industry surface finishers. And so just to add to a point that Russell made earlier on in regard to Cert 2 and Cert 3 and Cert 4 for surface finishers. In regard to, I guess, CASA and the EASA 66, we're certainly struggling with how we move to the B1, B2 system away from our current trade structure, which is more aligned to the old CASA system. But something that we are doing is that Army Aviation is doing a trial next year to do a straight through B1 course for their aircraft technicians, and our training provider at Wagga is mapping that training package they have from EASA against the MEA package that we deliver to defence trainees, and so we'll understand probably by first quarter next year better what those differences are. Third point, just in relation to drones, and as perhaps a potential recruiting source to think about is certainly for Air Force cadets, we're buying some small drones so they can play with some aviation things, and so we get a lot of recruits out of Air Force cadets from across Australia and from regional areas, but it might also be a fertile ground that could be looked at by aviation companies or people who are interested in aviation and might want a career in that, perhaps in the civil aviation environment. And so those are just three of the points I just wanted to add to some of the previous discussions, and that was it from me.
Thank you, Adrian, and thanks for your participation today. Mary, final comments?
Sorry, keep going. I just think from my perspective, summarising everything that we've already spoken about today, but I think moving forward, the best support that the industry could have is bring together with federal government support a group of people that can start to really talk about what recovery will look like for this industry and put together the framework, not only addressing the specifics that we've spoken about today around the specifics of skills, but more broadly a strategy for this industry to how do we address the challenges that we've got right here and now? How do we attract new people into the industry? How do we streamline that alignment that is currently misaligned between what it is that the regulator needs for a licence outcome and what it is that, as already has been spoken about, ASQA and other stakeholders that are involved are putting out through the industry that are currently being undertaken. And I just think that COVID is going to provide an opportunity for us as an industry to take stock and look at how do we move forward in a very productive and collaborative way to get this industry back up to the vibrant and sustainable level that we have known in years gone by. I think that is probably the biggest challenge facing us at the moment.
Mary, thank you. That's, look, from my perspective, I think it's fantastic, and certainly really trying to look at seizing the opportunity that the unfortunate COVID arrangements have created, but what can we do from that? And I really like what you proposed. Troy, any last minute comments from your good self if the technology is still hanging in there for you?
Yeah, look, I apologise. It hasn't been ideal today. I guess there's just 2 points that I want to make. The first one is the state borders for registered training organisations. That's a real bugbear for me because I've got apprentices in different states and there's different training levels, different training outcomes, as in the quality of the outcome. So I'd like to see a little bit more, when we talk about collaboration, I'd love to see collaboration between different states on the training quality and training product. And secondly, I understand the issues around licensing. I'm sorry if we've already spoken about this and I missed it, but I've been banging on to CASA for a number of years about building a license, particularly the B1 licence around for the old engine and airframe licence category would be equal to a mechanical Cert 4, and then they would issue the licence with the electrical exclusions on it to allow people to still build those licences like we used to be able to build in the old days. So, but I'm just not getting any anywhere with that, and it's more of a minute issue for GA, I find, than for an organisation like us. But I just see that the framework for licensing, if we were to use it to its fullest, all of the licensing issues from GA right up to the big end of town would disappear. But we just need, I guess, to come together on that and try and push CASA a little bit harder. So sorry.
Thank you. No, really good, Troy, and thank you, special thanks for hanging in there. Russell, I'm going to hand back to you. I think we've got some really good insights and I think there's been some good discussion. I'll hand over to you to wrap up.
Thanks, Sharon. And yes, I agree. Look, the input from both the three panellists and certainly people sending their questions in has been great. As an industry, we're a very important industry, but in some ways we're a little niche market. So we need to come together. We need to work collaboratively together. I certainly encourage anybody in the industry, and I know Mary does it, and I know Troy does it, is to get out and talk to the training providers, talk to TAFE, talk about your issues. I know a lot of different organisations say to me, TAFE's not relevant to where we're at. Well, have you told them? Have you been out? Have you invited them into your workplace? We need to work closer together as an industry. I'd like to thank everybody for participating today. It's been really great. And the level of interest is encouraging. We need to have a highly skilled workforce for aviation in Australia, both from a tourism market, but also just for the country as a whole. Regional Australia relies heavily on aviation. The economy relies heavily on aviation being effective. To be effective, we have to have a strong maintenance industry. I hear comments about, we will have challenges from overseas for maintenance, but there's still organisations to have aircraft maintained in Australia. I think continuity of service, guarantee of delivery will become an issue going forward. Yes, a lot of overseas providers will be cheap, but can they guarantee service? I'd really like to take this opportunity to also thank Sharon and the people at IBSA for organising today's webinar. This has been the first. It takes a lot of effort. I know Sharon and her people, particularly have been very committed to deliver today's webinar and across the other webinars as well. The aim is that in the future we'll have other webinars. We really strongly want to look at that. So bear with us. We're all new at this. Where to next? Obviously, we're looking at gathering all the information from the various webinars. We'll be sitting down with the support of IBSA, the IRC chairs. We'll be getting in some key people from industry, and we'll then be going to government, outlining the issues that have been raised for the respective streams. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about manufacturing. Aerospace is a little bit different, but we still align with the government's commitment to ensure that we have a strong competitive industry within Australia. So that is certainly our focus. So early in the new year, we'll get together with the other IRC chairs, some people from industry. We'll review the information we've received. We'll go back to people. There'll be further opportunities for people to contribute. There'll certainly be a survey conducted. We really value your input. We want feedback. I know from my perspective, I think this is a very effective tool, and going forward, I want to see us do it a lot more often. Again, thank you for all the interest. It's been great to hear certainly your input. There's a lot of knowledge out there we should share and work with that. With that, I thank you.